Good evening and welcome to the City Manager's proposed work session on livable, green, and prospering, whatever, with the City Council. What are we? Livable, green, and prospering. Livable, green, and prospering city. There we go. This is the second work session with the Council, and we've got more to follow, but we'll pick up where we left off, and welcome to everyone that's present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. This is our second work session, our first real foray into departmental operating budgets. You just introduced the folks at the table. I think everybody knows, but just in case you don't, we have to my left Nelson Smith, our budget director, Chris Beaver, our assistant budget director, and Mark Kinks, deputy city manager. We'll just sort of walk through here. We certainly have the department heads in the back, so if you all, council asks questions that you're answering, just make sure I'm putting up so that both we can catch it on the recording and that they can hear you up front.
Is the air conditioning coming?
Then we turned it down to, turned it down to 60.
Yes, I did. Just picked up these.
I got a jacket on.
Take it off.
I'll give it to you.
Put it down. So you all have seen sort of how the general fund resources are allocated by focus areas. This will be a consistent slide as we work through the work sessions, and today we're focusing on livable, green, and prospering city. You can see the departments that make up this focus area: code, administration, historic, Alexandria, housing, planning and zoning, department of project implementation and tests. The general fund allocation here is $70.4 million, and just to highlight some outside agency investments that come into this number, for economic development activities, we have ACDA, which is funded at $2.2 million, AEDP at $1.5 million, SBDC at $279. You can see holiday lights and first 9 expenditures here, and then the Alexandria Housing Development Corporation at $139,000. The lion's share of our outside agency investments include transit subsidies at $21.3.
Mr. Mayor, if we're going to go down that far in listing holiday lights at first night, then we need to have the marketing fund on there as well as part of the presentation.
The marketing fund is referenced elsewhere in the presentation, but we're happy to add it to the outside agency investments as well. The next slide talks about this investment of $70.4 million. What we're really showing you is where these programs are allocated in this focus area. In the livable sort of section here, we're spending $26 million in 21 programs, and the outcomes that we're trying to influence are so listed. And we've also provided the fiscal year 14 allocation and the fiscal year 15 allocation. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about some investments that make this up. We just want to show you where the resources are being allocated according to the outcomes that we're tracking and that we're trying to align to. In the green area, it's $2.5 million for 2 programs, and in prospering $41.8 million in 10 programs. When we look at all of the resources that we're spending for the activities and programs here, that number grows to be certainly more significant than the general fund number of $70 million. When we look at all funds, we're spending $140.4 million for the programs and activities here, to include, I'll just call out a couple of the special tax districts for Potomac Yard, Dash, and sanitary sewer. The largest resource here is $28.7 million in grants, to include resources for NBCC funding, fiscal and non-fiscal year grants, affordable housing developer contributions also make up this $28.7 million.
And the code special revenue fund is the light blue.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Rashad, is this grants that the NDTC is handling for us or managing for us, or separate? Yeah. So these are the grants they manage.
These are grants. Under the former administration, the new requirement was that NDTC funds, we had to book them through the city rather than just have them go to NDTC, and we tell NDTC how to spend it, which we still we're required to show them on our books, so there's 27 million, and now, in a sense, shows in the budget that before was not on kind of the budget accounting, but was in the information that was given in the budget page.
So if we're showing it, let me try to understand it. If we're showing it in our budget, it's not there's a footnote, but it's actually in the cost.
So it's on the revenue and the
They give us the
expense
money
side.
now,
Just the
we write it back
pass-through.
there.
It's just the pass-through. We get it through our books, and back out to
Before, how do we do it? Before
It
it
was
wasn't.
never reflected.
Yeah.
It never
Right,
reflects.
so that's where I'm going, so that revenues are increased by $26 million as a result of this?
By that,
Not that.
it's it's 28 points. Sorry.
No,
That amount,
so-
basically, that amount of money shows now is coming through us. Before, we had a written text that talked about how we were using, spending NBTC money, so it's
Yeah,
not.
no, where I'm going, but I mean, it's on our books so that our revenues are from last year have increased by 28.7 million.
Not all
That's not the right number, but yeah.
28.7.
They've increased.
So that asterisk says that it includes 28.7 as NBTC and donations and affordable housing
Okay, all right.
contributions and other.
Most of it is. It
Most of
shows
it's
on our
in.
books.
But whatever the number is in our books now.
But that's important to point out because granted, it's a wash because you're carrying it on the expenditure side as well. But when people look at and see this dramatic increase in revenues, they need to know that it's an accounting.
Yes, it's an accounting change, basically, yes.
But along with that, though, is all the project management now that we have to pay for, and the reporting, and
This is an item to have on our.
yes, well, this
list
is
for the
something that
next
we're gonna
month.
deal with
The
the
new
state.
director of the
Yeah,
RTT
yeah.
is an unnecessary and duplicative accounting requirement that it worked fine before the old way,
And that's something a few of us talked to Jennifer about on Thursday, so, yeah.
Okay.
This next slide, we're just trying to show some of the major changes in all funds revenue. In the general fund, there's a change here of $400,000. This really is funding allocation decisions that were recommended out of the budget process. For MBTC grants, donations to affordable housing, it goes from 18.1 million to 28.7. And again, that's because we're reflecting the transit funding from MBTC. We have some increase in revenue generation from historic Alexandria and a bit of reduction in expected new developer contributions for affordable housing. Dash operating up by 1.3, sanitary and storm sewer up by 218,000, 3.3%. Special revenue up $2.5 million. Potomac Yard Special Tax District up by 1.1 million. Internal transfers are moving a bit around for test vehicle acquisitions and interfund transfers. Changes between these funds now 1.3 million. This next slide is just really a visual. You don't need to sort of track through all these. We're just showing all of the programs that we have at this 140 million and sort of their relative size. And so we're tracking all of the expenditures out of just $140 million, and sort of the color code at the top just gives you an order of magnitude of how those program investments are increasing or staying really the same, or in some cases or in several cases are decreasing. A lot of the changes we're going to sort of talk through in the next section of this presentation, and Mark's going to walk through some of the significant ones here. Just to remind you of the priorities and trade-offs that we talked about when we gave the budget presentation. Our effort here was really to focus resources on specific programs and outcomes. So we have some additional investments in historic Alexandria. We're investing in a new permit system to improve customer service to both residents and the development community. We prioritize affordable housing funds to focus on multifamily affordable housing initiatives. So we've done a fund transfer for the homeownership program. We have resources there to enhance civic engagement efforts, resources to provide for planning and development and project implementation needs. We have recommendations to increase the King Street trolley service hours and begin implementation of the wayfinding program. And then we're recommending changes to the marketing campaign fund to actually reduce that fund amount and focus those resources on Delray and Old Town. We're continuing investments in existing assets and core programs, and we talked about this in certainly the presentation of the budget, increasing from 22 million miles to 40 million miles in terms of road and sidewalk maintenance, investments in stormwater management to improve our B&P maintenance, and we're also investing in expanded Dash bus service. As mentioned, the King Street trolley and the implementation will begin to operate the Potomac Yard bus rapid service. So let's dig a little deeper into some specific programs and key investments, and then turn over to Mark to walk us through those.
As the focus group put its budget together, it was a tale of two cities, if you will. The general fund, you'll notice as Rashad indicated, beginning the general fund total for our focus group is less than current and less than the current year. However, the all funds total has significantly increased because of basically NDTA revenues that were not available a year before, and therefore there was a you'll see like the King's Street trolley, for example, have expanded transportation, while other things have reduced or held relatively even. In promoting neighborhoods that are amenity rich, the pieces here, the targeted investments here are the larger pieces of the planning work program, which is implementation of things like the waterfront, the Vermont bus barn planning process has started and will continue. Two things that are not in the budget: one's the Eisenhower West All Area Plan. The $500,000 the developers have contributed is coming kind of this year. It's kind of an off-budget income, so that between that and Oakville Triangle, we're planning and zoning and D&S negotiated $250,000 developer paying for the activities there. So that's $750,000 of small area planning that is not having to be paid for by the general fund, although clearly the city is hired the consultants and directing matters. It comes at no cost. And you can see the rest of the list are how we development planning, forward art implementation. You'll start to see later on this year the first in the DSUPs in the Beauregard area, and bicycle master plan. We talked last night, Potomac Yard Metro Rail, LPA selection, Robinson Terminal North and South planning is proceeding. So those are basically all ongoing, really, throughout various pieces of the budget. And there are some additional resources for the implement of what's next, the Alexandria program. In particular, there's a position that TNES and planning and zoning are going to share, which will there's an additional level of work effort involved in implementing the what's next, and positions that will be assisting and really leading the effort.
Are we going to have an opportunity to come back and talk about that later, or are we talking about that now?
Now, probably.
Now would be the time.
I have a question.
Okay. Yeah, this was on my I think this was on my question list here.
Yeah, you requested some additional information about this.
Okay.
Or can answer.
You want to talk about it?
Yes, we can answer it.
I can't remember what I asked. I think I just.
Why don't I go ahead and ask my
Yeah,
question
go first.
With our hobby development, the last week we've had some, developments that took place that I think, raised a lot of questions in people's mind, and what kind of partner we're going to have with ARHA, particularly given the importance of some of their sites that they own and want to redevelop. I mean, are we feeling confident here that we have all the information, before us and that we need to make, intelligent decisions? And because I have to say, I personally was a little concerned about how things played out, and what is the actual purpose of the project that is currently being proposed, and what does it mean for us in the future, particularly, given a couple of the sites that are already going to cause a lot of angst and a lot of debate.
I mean, we've been in discussions with Roy about what his RFP is. They've gotten feedback from us, they've incorporated it, they've actually been pretty responsive. It's always difficult for us because their mission is to provide affordable housing or public housing. And our mission is much more eclectic to involve the community and balance a lot of different things. So,
And no one's denying that.
but it's worked well. It's worked pretty well so far. We have Roy, for example, on the bus barn group that's meeting upstairs. So they're participating, and I think there's a pretty good relationship. I think the difficulty for us is going to be if it ends up being a number of those projects at the same time, that we're going to have a struggle doing all that processing and community outreach. But otherwise from that, I think that there's a pretty good understanding of what the expectations are from both sides.
But we hear that, and we're told that, but every time we
Well, then there's always a
deal with
surprise,
them,
like
there's
the
always a
Washington
wrinkle, there's
schools.
always a last minute development, there's always something.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just think
I think the, one is on the redevelopment planning, the RFP, we I'm going to sit on a committee and help pick the development team that will be working with our house. Will be directly involved in who they will be partnering with on the private side. And then second of all, we had a meeting today, CEO of the Housing Authority, his staff, walking through and reiterating the importance of community involvement in the community process. And hopefully there was some lessons learned this past week in regards to how to proceed with the community and gave them more advice about working blocks.
But that's exactly, they've had that lesson how many times now? I mean, and it was the one thing that we asked for, the one thing.
We made that point today about how difficult both the project they're pursuing will be and the upcoming redevelopment will be if they don't have a citizen engagement strategy that really is inclusive, that is at the front end of their process. And it makes it very difficult then for us to work in cooperative partnership with them to the extent they don't do that. And that was part of our discussion today.
And there's a meeting of the redevelopment council or redevelopment group on Monday, which will be another opportunity for that to be reiterated. It may mean that as they proceed through the development process, that would be the vehicle to keep close relationship with at the senior level between the city and our. It's not.
I mean, I know you guys have a challenge.
It's a challenge, but I think that we're just going to, as they proceed with the redevelopment process, we're just going to have to think of ways to keep very close to what they're doing.
Because it hurts overall efforts in general, and not just with our that's the problem. And Farrell, just one piece of information, if they have to come in, per se, exceptions to what they can currently develop on a site, does that go through a normal process for you?
Yes, they'll have to go through rezonings and DSUPs, and it'll come
like
through
anyone
us
else
and
would.
That's you, yeah, and just the regular one. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it was actually, there were two questions, two separate parts of the budget, but really the same issue. So we had the within tests we have the new additional FTE for civic engagement, public communication for $72,000, and then I think in the CMO we had a $60,000 contract support for civic engagement. And what's next? So I guess wrap that up for me. I mean, what are we? I mean, this is obviously, I think everybody.
Start with the FTE first.
Yeah.
Can I sort of add on to that? Yeah, I think it's sort of a lot of people are feeling is like, well, what's next is lays out changes in process and the philosophy, but do you really need extra staff? So.
I think that's a really good question, and we discussed that at length in the focus area team. One of the things that we see is that the most controversial time in a project is basically when you're starting up the project, you're trying to get to that singular alternative. In the civic engagement plan that we work through as an interdepartmental team, fortunately or unfortunately, most of the projects that are in the first couple of years are projects that are in TNES. Corridor C, AA, EA, we discussed last night. We also have a number of large projects Potomac Yard Metro will continue. We've got the Head Bike Master Plan. All these projects are quite a bit different than small area plans, but share some similarities. And these are projects that basically are going to impact how people's frontages dramatically change, and right of way on their streets, a lot of engagement. The bar is dramatically raised. For example, for most of our capital projects, we don't have websites. We don't update websites right now. We have one general website. Kathleen Leonard is here. Kathleen, put your hand up. She prepares all the information releases, which are reviewed, I think, in a very good way with Craig Pfeiffer and Tony's shop. But to have all this additional sort of the bar being raised, and the community expectations, the meetings that I go out at are, we want a website on the page, we want the information up there beforehand, we want to have a Q&A section. So it really is raising the bar, more like what I heard from several of the council members with regard to something like VDOT sites with the noise walls. You can go to that site, you can look at almost real-time information being put up, and you can actually see what occurred at the meetings having not been there.
And we all agree with you, but I will tell you that as far as I'm concerned, and I agree, I don't think we need additional staff to do it. I think we got people already in other areas that should be doing it, and that's what we're going to focus on doing our work sessions in terms of the add deletes, and that's how we'll get there. Okay?
So, okay, and then so they will kind of ratchet back our communication.
Right. So, certainly I mean, obviously, council makes whatever changes they be necessary, and we just have to try to be realistic about what we can commit to based upon that resource. I don't know that we can commit to the kind of sort of dynamic sharing with the existing set of staff that we have, but we'll communicate where we think that.
So I think your job is to tell us what you really need, what you want to accomplish, and then with that, we, in terms of the total manpower, staffing levels, then collectively we'll agree or disagree on how we make that.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely.
Rashad, is there a possibility with with Tony's departure and any possible restructuring of the communications office, realigning folks to, maybe have new responsibilities or
we are looking at
new jobs?
We're looking at a realignment there. We just sent something to you yesterday about some structural changes.
I know, I saw that, but I'm giving you
where
an
some
opportunity.
components are going to go. We may have some possibility to increase our horsepower there in terms of general communication, but the need for sort of corporate communication is extensive, and this is a bit separate from that. So we're looking at that though as to what we can do with his departure and sort of the overall staffing level within communication that will result from that. Some of the other structural changes we made.
Can I ask a question? So, well, first of all, the second piece was the 60,000.
The 60,000 is in our office. So our office is overseeing, City Mayor's office is overseeing the sort of the implementation of the what's next possibly throughout the organization. And so we anticipate that there will be times, both one, that we need to engage city staff to understand how to move through this process in a consistent fashion and that comports with what we adopted for implementation. So different levels of engagement will now have different standards, and how we approach that with the community and walk through that with the community is going to require some training and effort on our part with our existing staff. The second is, depending on the kind of engagement process that we're talking about, we may have some need for outside facilitation and discussion on some of those issues. That was somewhat, actually, I think it was successful when the schools did that with Jefferson Houston, to have some of those conversations early on about what it is that they're designing and building. We don't have a resource already to accomplish that, and so that was the intention of that dollar there. If we don't have that, certainly, then we'll work it with what we do have.
Well, I guess I would kind of echo the mayor's skepticism about kind of, especially with the decisions we have before us here, that type of expenditure. I guess the question I have on kind of what Rich was referencing as it relates to websites and things like that, especially when it comes to capital projects. I mean, that can be part of that capital project payload where you know, if we're looking for a, you know, if there's a kind of a standard communication effort we're going to do on, say, transit lane, transit ways, or something like that, you know, that stuff could be capitalized.
You could build it in the capital
Yeah, you
cost
could build that
of
into the
the
project. You know, the ability to create a website and the ability to do some of this stuff. I mean, that can be built in as part of that.
And we certainly can. That will be a little bit of a change because we'll be using a contractor, which we can certainly do. It won't be at the level to which we've discussed and brought to the council, specific engagement, what's next sort of plan. So we'll just have to align our expectations with council funds. I mean, we just need to realize that I was really clear, you know, in the focus area team that we just don't want to be the department that lets people down, where it's like we were expecting this and you're delivering this and the council's expectation. So, I mean, if the expectation is adjusted and the work level commensurately, then, I mean, you know, we'll do the best we can.
Guys, go ahead.
I was just, we were just talking about it, you know, one thing to maybe think about, some expense for like website upgrade, that's not an FTE to me, that's a contracted out service maybe, and a one-time expenditure, and maybe a broader than more, instead of just one or two agencies or whatever, as part of this, what's next, but it's adding an FTE, that's a permanent change, so.
Yeah, and Rashad, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, is there a possibility of, you know, farming out some of the, you know, looking, you know, if we are finally going to be looking at the website, can we maybe do it through a contractor to get that platform established, and then give us the ability to manipulate sections of the site to add, you know, staff presentations, comments, or whatever? Because several of us have been asking for redesigns for a long time. It's just really hard for people to find things on the web, on our website, and you know, numerous times people who are competent professionals can't find things, and they go to meetings, and then they have to be corrected by staff, and it is on the website, but no one can find it.
So separate from this discussion about how we deal with individual projects is the look and feel of the web, and associated with that is the content management system we use to keep it updated. And so we do intend to look at updating and refreshing the look and feel and how we navigate the page, and that would be done externally. We would contract that out with professionals that do that. And what may come with that is a different sort of back-end system that makes it easier for us to make those changes within departments. And so that's sort of one base level, but there still is sort of the dynamicness of moving with these projects and folks updated with some of these key pieces. And we'll just take a look at it. I mean, if we make changes, if you all make changes there, we'll just take a look at what that resource is and when we can mix it. We can come back and talk to you about that.
And as you're looking at the realignment of the communications office, this has been suggested in the past, and you know, the call, click, connect, I'm not sure, you know, if it's really maybe working the way it was intended to. You know, some of the responses back, you know, initially, was there ever any discussion about actually having an actual ombudsman? Like, you know, someone who's got a really good understanding of the community, who could, you know, give something other than, you know, gee, the council's received your email, thank you, and, you know, we'll be back to you with a response.
In terms of Conflict Connect, we are, so we shifted where that responsibility lies as well. And we are looking at how that rolls out, what we're doing. We'll be looking at the standards of response and sort of really how we dig into customer service issues with departments and agencies. And so I do expect that that will improve over time, and we'll sort of change how that works and operates, eventually getting to the point where we want to look at investing in a 311-like system that has a lot more sophisticated technology than what we have today. But we are taking a very hard look at that, Paul, and that was part of the rationale for changing some of where that structure lies and how we're approaching that.
And the next slide is largely a housing. This is a housing slide. The targeted investments here are increasing the amount of home ownership loans. You recall that was a program that was reduced in prior year budgets. And at the same time, because the amount of repayments of home ownership loans has been higher than budgeted and projected in the current fiscal year, that $800,000, which is 20, roughly 20 units. 20 units has been reallocated to basically the multifamily responsibilities of the Office of Housing. The total budget shows a large increase, but it is almost all attributable to carryover funding, some of which is money for Beauregard that is being earmarked until that project starts, as well as payments of developer contributions on some of those multifamily projects that are being built, receiving money in the current year. The next slide.
Can I just ask one quick question on that? How do we account for our obligation or the funds that we, loaned or sort of promised to a group like RL and others? Are they included in this total? Are they separate?
The 5 million that we were talking about recently is not in here because we don't currently have it. So it's accounted for separately, but when RHI repays it, it would be in here until they use it again. But we do keep track of all of our outstanding loans separately.
But it's not included in any of the budget figures.
It's not in this number.
Until you get it back.
Right.
Or we can get it.
Or if they're paying
If we do.
residual receipts or something. If
Yes,
they're paying
yeah, if we
that,
get it.
Yes.
that- just only that portion would.
Yeah.
Okay, the next slide, in attractive urban environment is the long-term outcome. Includes a well-functioning infrastructure, is a mix of responsibilities, both in EDS and historic Alexandria. Probably the greatest number of individual changes, many of them smaller, are in historic Alexandria, and in part that reflects in looking back of where budget cuts have occurred over the last number of years, probably since 2008. OHA probably bore a disproportionate burden of cuts, and part of the plan here is to, by doing some reorganization and adding a director of development position to fundraise multiples of the person's salary, that is over the long term to make OHA more self-sufficient. In addition, there are increases in money for workload, both in archaeology as it relates to monitoring ongoing development applications, as well as adding to the record center where we got behind in both getting rid of things and bringing things in and organizing them in the center. So that should help us get them caught up.
Mark, can I ask a question on that? Was that what the woman on Monday night was referring to, the public records, or is that something that?
I think that's the same operation as you primarily referring to the capital improvements.
The capital, right, the
capital
building itself.
improvements, which are.
But it's the same,
It's
same office, same.
That's correct, yeah.
There's some money in 14 that's being looked at to look at the design of that facility right now, but the full request that they have is not funded in 15, but General Services, I believe, is taking a look at the facility and seeing exactly what we need to do and what resources we have.
And we'll probably focus on the fire protection system
Fire
first
protection.
and the HVAC system second.
So can we, sorry.
I was just thinking when she was talking, is it worth fixing? I mean, could we, get rid of the building, if we're looking to put another department somewhere else or something, or across the street in IT, is there space where you could, provide a modern, more modern facility or something than sticking it in the corner there?
Given the volume of stuff that's in the record center.
Well, to move it, well, I know it's huge. Yeah.
So we do not have that kind of space in another location, and as well as the building is a solidly built building, and not only also the record center, but also there's storage for the office. Historic Alexandria, there's an archaeology lab and storage area. In fact, the old refuse pit in the basement actually has shelving and storage materials in it.
Was it built specifically to be this?
It was built as it's a city's incinerator. That's, the stack is still there. It's retrofitted, adaptive reuse.
Good question, sort of going on the walls. I mean, how far away are we from sort of running out of space in that building? You know, when I met with those folks, that was sort of their big concern. It's like, well, let's look at the space because.
Well, the plan we've developed, we expect will run out between 10 to 15 years from now by implementing this new plan. And we have met with General Services. We've devised a plan to break this up into segments and fund it from our existing capital over the next 3 years or so, starting in this year. But as Mark said, it's a lot more complicated than just the records. In fact, the rooms of the incinerator have now been outfitted with high-density shelving, so they're literally 95% full. You know, when you need a file, you have to move all the shelves to make an aisle. We also have all the storage for our artifact and antique collections, which number over 3 million objects, as well as all of our museum infrastructure, cases, display cabinets.
You should open up a tour like the Smithsonian does.
Well, you know, ultimately, our future project, we'd like to develop a facility called Alexandria's Attic, where it would be open to people to see the storage system as another museum facility.
Until we do that, do we have? I mean, I know there's companies that do kind of off-site storage and things like that. Do we have the ability to send these things off to?
We are doing that now. It's not cost effective.
Really?
That the cost continues to go up. It's difficult to retrieve those files if we need them because we always have to give them notice. Many times we get a FOIA request and we're there at the last possible second getting that file back. That's been an area that's been exploding for us. But the other thing that this budget addresses is the destruction of files that have met their date of obsolescence, because we've been behind on that too. So by destroying more of those files quicker, that makes room for the rest. But in the plan that we've come up with, it's about a $500,000 investment over 15 years, but it buys us time to come up with a long-term plan for this issue.
Do we have the ability? I know when we all met with the committee, they all sat down with us, and I know when I met with them, one of the things we talked about was the possibility of digitizing some of these records, and they didn't like that idea very much, but I did. And what are the opportunities there for that?
There are vast opportunities, and we're doing that wherever we can. But there are, you know, we abide by the state regulations, and there are there's millions of files that we must keep.
Well, that was one of the things we actually talked about. Is in this this may be in the legislative package item for us for next year. And you know, someone could kind of do some thinking around this. If there are some requests that we need to make of the state about how they modernize their records retention policies, I mean that's something we should do, especially. Right. And I think we're kind of a uniquely situated jurisdiction given the scope and scale of our history, where we might be able to push them along a little bit to allow us to do some of those things, and especially given the costs that we're talking about here.
Right.
Because actually, you know, in some ways, digitizing some of these records actually makes them more accessible and easier to respond to FOIAs and easier to get, you know, to get back to people. Can I ask some questions on the OHA stuff for a second?
Yes, maybe John can add something on the.
We are in the process right now.
Is he needing code?
Actually, we're partners.
Yeah, we absolutely are.
Yeah,
a lot of our files are really his files.
Yeah, and also they're part of the permit center now. So, but we have a project right now that we're working to digitize most of the planning, zoning, tests, and code records that are there. And then as we move forward with replacement of our permit plan system, we will be moving towards electronic plan submittal. And once we get electronic plan submittal, we will not be printing.
There'll never be a piece of paper.
Right. So that will also help reduce the storage needs in the future. And I think we're probably going to be the first group to go out in that area and in that arena. And then once we've done it, maybe we'll break some ground so others can do it as well.
Okay. So, I mean, are we still keeping, like, for example, I mean, are city council minutes printed and sitting in there? I mean, for meetings where they're sitting online already?
In some cases, there are time regulations with every document every department produces. So most items, there's a 3-year period there, and then we dispose of them.
Okay.
But aren't there laws now about digital records? I mean,
Yes.
I mean, it's allowed. I mean, it's a legal document.
I think, and I don't know what the rules are, you know, when I was sitting with the folks, I think they identified that there were, because I was pushing this, and they said, oh, a lot of these records, the state won't let you digitize, and they were citing all kinds of different records that they felt like the state wouldn't allow us, so I don't know, you know, I know they've opened the door, maybe we need to push farther in the door.
Yeah.
So on the OHA, the positions, or the position and the reclassification, can we, because I'm trying to understand here, so we're creating a director of development position, but we're funding it for 9 months, so that's $65,000 for the 9 months. Does that leverage additional revenue? Do we have this is one of my budget amendment questions. Do we have, you don't need to answer it, you can answer now. Do we have revenue that we're budgeting associated with that?
Actually, Councilman, I think your question was on the deputy director position.
I'm coming to that.
Not the director of development, but I think we can answer them,
okay.
them both. We have tried to focus our budget request on issues that will help us achieve long-term sustainability in the Office of Historic Alexandria by developing new revenue sources. Now, will these show up in the 2015 budget? No, we have not included them because they
You not include revenue associated with it?
We have not included the revenue in the general fund. Revenues will go into our shop and donations accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So the revenues of these through new program events, new retail merchandising, those are separate from the general fund. We do supplement departmental expenses out of those accounts. The merchandise that we sell, when we have a ball at Gatsby's Tavern, the revenue raised from that event will pay for part-time staff, will pay to buy collections through the museum, will pay for visitor services that, you know, frankly, the city shouldn't provide. You know, my perspective is the city owns the property, they should maintain the buildings and the utilities, but the extras, the things that really make a museum come alive, should have an external source of support. So that's what will happen in 15. You will see how those are budgeted because you'll see it in the supplemental appropriation that comes up during the year. When we have income coming in, it'll be appropriated at that time. We will be including revenue projections in the 16 budget because there will be a number of initiatives we're working on with these positions in 15 that will be implemented in the year 16.
So can I get, I mean, you don't have to give me right now the numbers, but just an kind of maybe this is an LC question, but the scale of what we expect those to be, and then so that I guess that answers for me the director of development position. But why are we reclassifying the museum director to deputy director?
The deputy director position I'm expecting will generate an addition of about 5 to 15% in the area of say $70,000 to $80,000 in new revenues for our shop and donations account over the next year. The development director, I've committed that position will raise 3 times what it costs us in 15 funding. This is a new position. The city doesn't even have this title right now. As I said, this will be both short-term and long-term projects. A short-term project would be something like when we did the ice well last year. That was a $400,000 project that we raised most of the funds privately. We're still fundraising for the last part of that. We're also looking for this position to develop new opportunities, such as providing an endowment for OHA, where each year we would use the interest provided that endowment, but we would preserve the corpus of that trust that would continue to build over time to provide for years where revenues aren't what they should be in the city without having to resort to major cutbacks in services. This was our one weakness. It was addressed in our review by the American Association of Museums. They chided us because we didn't have a dedicated fundraising professional. Incidentally, in the new Fort Ward draft management plan, the consultants also picked that up, and we did not, you know, go to them with that recommendations. But they, in that plan, if you read that plan, it's online on the Parks website right now. They say OHA needs a fundraising professional just dedicated to that. The difference between the two, the deputy director is focused on coordinating program ideas within individual museums. Right now I have individual museum directors doing separate programs at each site. I'm looking for someone other than just myself to coordinate these activities so that we focus on activities that work and produce revenue and just not produce an event that everybody, you know, received a warm and fuzzy feeling at the end of the day. The development director, that's more focused on annual funding, whereas the development director is really focused on a long-term stabilization for departmental revenues.
And you feel so this is, the reclassification is necessary in order to make that happen at your deputy director position?
Yes. We don't have that level of position right now. I'm kind of a one-man act in my department. I'm the fiscal agent, I'm the director, and much as I would like, in fact, this is a favorite area of mine, I'm pulled in so many directions. And we have some programs that really work phenomenally well. We have some that work fairly, and we have others that are marginal. So we'd really like to focus on those activities that excel. And we do have opportunities to do that. You've seen right now with our War of 1812 and Civil War initiatives, kind of for the first time, we've got different museums working collaboratively to develop programs and services that complement but don't compete with one another. And that's really what this is all about.
I must have missed a paragraph somewhere around here. You're not talking about the directors of or the managers, if you will, of individual museums?
No. I'm talking about
I want to be sure.
the deputy director who would be involved with new revenue opportunities.
Okay. So there's not an
at all
existing
museums.
person right now.
No.
It's the position, not the person.
He's taking one of his museum director positions and upgrading it, making it a deputy director.
Okay. Other initiatives on this page that are key, referring to the GIS analyst positions funded by the CIP, working on project implementing IT projects to basically the operations side to assist with the operations at RMS, health and safety area, asset management, which is the CityWorks program that helps asset parks and rec run and track their operations and track their performance, and permitting systems, which a little further down the page, and mentioned that we got $1.7 million in the budget. This is actually monies from prior year code revenues that we related for this purpose, replace the 20-year-old permitting system, and get that electronic plan submission with it as well. And we would go from a outdated originally mainframe-based system, which just tells you how old it is, to something where we'll have, as mentioned, we talked about records management, much more electronic things like shared electronic view, working on electronically submitted plans by different departments at the same time rather than sending around multiple sheets for departments to work on. This is something where we are probably behind the rest of the region, and this is one of the, I think, big pieces to really move this forward to catch up and in fact hopefully go ahead of some of the other jurisdictions in this area. We've added some staff and half the project implementation office in order to basically process and deliver more projects. The major one was the civil engineer. We've got a lot of transportation monies that we've been allocated in NBTA in the last years. They can get planned, they can get community expectations increased, but somebody's got no engineer to build it, and then looking at the resources needed to get those implemented. So the project implementation office needed those increases. Everything else in that office is basically transfers of positions from other departments. And the last thing on the page
I ask about code for just a second? I remember when building PTO, they set up a shed down on the site so they could, people would have to come down to City Hall to get the paperwork processed. Maybe you already told us on this, but for NSF, are you doing anything special at all?
We have ability now to do all your permitting online, so you would not even have to come to the office. With projects like that now, though, we're on from the model because it was very unsustainable to bring on staff, city staff. We get the economic downturn, we have to considerably reduce our staffing levels. So what we've done now is we've gone to a third-party model where we developed a third-party policy. And developers, we set a criteria where they can do it by right, and then they can also ask us to do it if it's not by right. And so far, we've had quite a few that have taken advantage of that, and that is a service they pay for while still paying for the permitting fees. And so what we've been able to do now is do some staff into quality assurance with that program. But probably for every 3 inspectors we would have had to add during this uptick, one person can handle that. So we've been able to do it with our existing staff levels. We've not had to add a single staff person to the uptick from where we were in the economic downturn.
And SF knows part of what the city put forward was they get first in line treatment. They have an inspection, they have an issue, they know, 1, they can call John, and 2, the staff and John and the rest of the permit center know that that particular project, once they start construction, well, even the building reviews so far, once they start construction, they begin
We've also structured slightly differently as well. We've put in a special projects coordination position. Again, it was existing, we just realigned. That's going to be the person who will be staying on top of these very important projects for the city. And they requested that we do the inspections on the project. They would have had the ability to do third party, but they felt we could do those, and they requested us.
Mark, if I could real quick while we're on it. Carol, the 2 GIS positions, are these the same positions we've been talking about the last couple of years? I mean, I assume you want to move them to the operating side because you see the need for these for the foreseeable future, or
Yes,
you're just the funding is running out and now you're...
Well, it's a little bit of both. So the funding is the capital funding. That funding is running out, and we always sort of knew that we would need to keep these people on at some point because otherwise the investment in the capital improvements is going to not be maintained. I mean, it's sort of a waste of money to spend on building these fancy, extremely effective, citywide
Yeah, you don't have to
applications.
pay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
What about the new projects and the new redevelopments? I mean, weren't they funding part of this? Or was it the actual? Or you were just funding it out of capital proceeds? Okay.
The capital project to the IT plan has funded basically various capital projects related to software implementation, hardware implementation. In the case of GIS, we're working on putting new systems in. They're now in, and we also at the same time the systems now will have to be maintained, so it's getting moved over to maintenance of.
So, sorry.
A quick question. I think it was in relation to the GIS stuff, and I guess I was also looking for training or funding for staff to maintain certification or if you have certification. I don't know if that was I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I had a couple places, and I'm sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. I look at my list and go back and cross-reference. So one of my questions related to the conversion of the part-time administrative support position to full-time for the planning services and information counter. Is this fee funded? This half? And I guess the second question is why not?
Because this is a planning and zoning person, it's not somebody who's dealing with the building permit issues as part of the permit center.
So what are they doing? It says providing members of the general public, business person with answers a variety of planning and land use positions that are not necessarily related to permit.
So we have a zoning what we call the zoning counter right now, planning and zoning. We have two things. We have a person who functions as a half-time planning and zoning counter. And the planning and zoning counter is all kinds of, we have lots of people coming in asking general questions, my historic house, windows, doors. I want to file an application for an SUP or whatever, you know, little small business applications. What zone am I in, etc. So that counter is currently staffed by planners 2 and 3, who rotate. And so every week they spend hours at the zoning counter, and it takes them away from all the other work that they're supposed to be doing. We think that that work could actually be done by somebody at a lower technical level. That we're sort of overpaying people at a high level to do work that's lower than the level that they're professionally doing. So the idea here would be to not need a receptionist anymore. We're one of the few departments, maybe the only one in the city hall that's got a receptionist who actually lives at the hall. But to go to a phone tree system and have that receptionist be somebody who could sort of, we still need some kind of reception. We have many people who come through our department every day for meetings and to meet with staff and asking questions. So we still need somebody to provide that function, but we would like to combine it with that information function, so that the planners can spend their time, you know, more effectively and efficiently.
So this position is I guess, providing that full-time kind of answer service essentially in the planning at the desk there.
Yes.
And there is no way to, I mean,
well, so fee-wise, all of our fees go into the general fund. We increased development fees last year by a lot, and in fact, we anticipated recovering about an additional $400,000 a year from that fee increase. We're on a sort of like a 3-year cycle, so we weren't planning to go back and relook at those fees for another couple of years. We are increasing some fees this year. There's an IT levy that we're increasing, and that'll end up being about $40,000, but that actually goes into the special fund.
Well, it's really adding that to permits that are already added to the John shops. So trying to calibrate those and cross test.
yeah, and I guess whenever we're adding people that support kind of a direct activity that generates fees, I'm always reluctant to go general fund on that to fund it, but I appreciate that this one's not directly tied to those
we saw this as a
activities.
fairly economical way to increase, productivity across the board.
Can I ask about another planning one? The wayfinding. This is now on page 1244. They have a part-time position to manage implementation of the city wayfinding. This one's funded out of TIP, not general fund. But help me understand what this one's doing.
So we basically have the wayfinding program that you all approved several years ago, and what we've done so far is put those big blue signs over the city parking garage. We've had money in the CIP every year, and we have not been able to spend all of it because we don't have the staff between Rich and I together. We don't have the staff to actually spend the money that's in the program.
It's just like a project management type role. I mean, it's for the wayfinding.
It's project management for implementing wayfinding. So we have the capital dollars, but not the staff.
Well, again, I kind of beg my same question that I keep asking. Why don't we just capitalize that? I mean, why isn't that PM time? If it's a capital project associated with wayfinding, why don't we set aside a portion of that capital project to fund the PM, and then when that capital project is done? I just hate to bring in a new permanent employee to manage a project that may not have capital funding in the future.
Well, the function of this position really is to, as Farrell said, it's to implement, but it's actually the locational issues with the foundations, utilities, working within the right of way. So that's the main function. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And Rashad, just one quick question. When you established Emily's office, the department, did you think about naming it something other than just generically project implementation? Well, no, I mean, I think people are confused by that title. They don't necessarily associate project with infrastructure and the type of sophisticated, detailed project she's doing. I just. Well, I don't know what I call it. I mean, that's why I'm asking.
I think
it's sort of a general term
sort of
that
stayed from the way we introduced it a couple of years ago. I don't know if you all explored names.
I mean, I think it's, you sort of talked about it, but in the efforts of getting it up and running, we haven't spent a lot of energy on that.
Yeah,
So
I'm just sort of
we call
curious
that
more than
the
anything.
title,
Because
and it may be that once we
Infrastructure management or something.
I'm sure Rich can come up with something that has dollar signs in it or something.
Do we need 3 FTEs to work through the naming process?
It's a good point, because
People are confused.
yeah. We're doing,
Right.
That's right, the naming committee, you guys.
So I think it would be that's something for us to think about as we get up and running, whether something fits better once we get fully created and rolling.
Because the only reason I ask is because, you know, as people find out more about that you exist and what you're doing, they think you're more on the, you know, like call, click, connect, or, you know, the what's next Alexandria side of things, as opposed to what it is you do.
Well, that's a good point. That's something we're thinking about.
In the old days, it was always referred to as public works.
I mean, it's capital projects, but so we have, it's well.
Yeah, it's just a comment.
Okay.
The last item list is $250,000 savings in order to savings for the general fund, and as Elsie has indicated, in order to kind of better account for workers' comp that's been allocated out to departments, and when that was done, TNAS and figuring out where those charges originate, which employees end up getting injured, in case of refuse collection. That is an area of high workers' comp costs. Let's look at it, and we can fit it and fund it within the existing rate. So it saves $250,000 in the general fund. There's also the sanitary sewer fund, which is another area of workers' comp charges. We're able to charge $100,000 there to the sanitary sewer rate, the existing sanitary sewer rate, which is not proposed to be changed, and therefore save between those two items in the general fund $350,000.
Can I ask a question on that? Laura, how does it relate to the work you did with the police and fire? Are they related at all to some of the work we did there, or is it something totally separate?
It's sort of related. The relationship has to do with physical standards, as you recall, when we were trying to come up with other ways to get police and fire. Fire has standard, but we want to expand it to TDS, general services, and other programs should have physical requirements for their job.
And that was a great project, by the way. The work that she and her team did as the mayor now, I mean, that'll go a long way to save a lot of money. But be fair to everyone at the same time. I mean, it's...
Okay, I have a quick question. On the project implementation, there's two, I hate to rehash an early conversation we had, but with those two additions, I know there's been a lot of talk just folks on council about the schedules of projects and trying to push things along and get things faster and whatnot. You know, are these bringing on these two decisions going to give us the opportunity to
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we see the volume coming in.
I just want to make sure.
And clearly one of the focuses is the project implementation office and the reorganization, which in a sense, as Tessa's was not worried about planning and implementation, getting the two having worked on both kinds of very different things at the same time, like having two separate departments and creates the single focus and working and Emily Shop hiring project implementation skills to be increased from employees as well as adding staff to the process. Be more efficient with existing resources, but also by adding staff resources to the process.
We're going to count on that.
So are we in the, if I'm asking a question about the stuff that's covered under residential renters fees, now a good time? Okay. So I think I submitted a request about, we did some things last year. We expanded we raised the fee beyond what the manager proposed last year in order to fund some additional things. Is everything we funded, there's a really good chart you guys had in here showing what was funded last year and kind of how it rolls over this year. is everything we did last year funded this year? Is it a continuation of current services in the fee? Because the fee stays the same, so is everything able to be funded at the $328? I'm on page 1274 of the budget.
So the programs that were funded in the manager-based budget last year, that was in year-round brush collection, that's the tub grinding capacity, that's the seasonal grass cycling. Those are all continued in the budget. Will continue in FY15 and beyond. Programs that were part of that $210,000 community reserve that we set aside. So there were portions of those programs that involved capital acquisitions. So we purchased a number of public space recycling containers. Those are actually in the process of going out now. Obviously, that program will continue. We will collect from those public space cans. The programs that will not continue beyond in FY15 are the farmers market composting program and the waste reduction program, which was envisioned as a pilot initially. Both of these were envisioned as pilots initially. The waste watcher program was one that it just sort of involves waste emergency, how much we can get out of the waste stream. The farmers market composting program was our attempt to allow residents to bring food waste to farmers markets around the city. It's a very successful program that's got a lot of use. Hundreds of people that are delivering weekly to these sites, including Del Rey. That's not going to continue after July.
Okay, so I think my question was what would be required of the refuse fee to continue current services essentially. Now I understand that there's a portion of what was in there that was capital acquisition, the trash, the recycling bins and all that, and you know, I guess it would make sense maybe not to continue a capital acquisition, but to the extent there were services in the farmers market thing, the waste reduction thing, and then we also talked about didn't we approve an additional hazardous waste collection site, an East End hazardous waste collection site? Wasn't that part of the discussion?
That was part of the discussion. We actually removed that from consideration because we were working with Parks and Recreation on making sure that the site that we had looked at as for one of those put-out locations actually was within 4 Mile Run Park. And so as Parks and Recreation goes through its large park planning process, it's being considered as a potential amenity in that park.
Okay. So I guess when you guys respond, can you detail what would be required for continuation?
But Jan, what was the return on that investment? I mean, were they successful, initiatives? And if so, how did you measure?
Yeah, so we're still evaluating the farmers market composting program. That was the program that we actually began in late fall. We actually have over 200 people that are coming to each one of these sites on a weekly basis. We've collected about 10,000 pounds of food waste up to this point. This is the important point to make about this program is that we've only really been doing this collection of farmers markets in the fall and winter. We haven't actually been able to do it, continue it on in the summer and the spring. At this point, though, the usage and the interest is exceptionally high. I can say it's higher than we envisioned. We're actually having a difficult time getting at the farmers market actually getting
I think just to further that, it was about $10 a year.
So it's a little bit over $1 added to the refuse fee if we just continue the food waste composting program. It's another $8.50 if we actually continue. So the public space recycling program actually had 2 phases. The first phase was putting about 85 cans out in use that leg field in parks, and we had a part-time person who was actually doing the collection. So that part-time person is going away. We're absorbing those collection costs now. The second phase was additional cans and more taking that part-time position. So that program is not funded.
Yeah, if we could get the details on that, that would be useful.
Okay. The next page, they're interspersed. There's some highlights from the CIP related to our long-term outcomes. And this one highlights the increases in the soft surface trail. The CIP dollar amount is up to 6120, and a near tripling of the dollar amount for the shared use paths. The explanation provided below. halftime and focused on paving issues only. If you recall, the 80s for a halftime position. In regards to probably the biggest change in the green portion where our focus group is in sewer maintenance. In this case, storm sewers, where we have permits for storm and sanitary. And in this case, storm permit, we are required to increase the city-owned maintenance and cleaning of city-owned BMPs to meet our permit requirements and this equipment that is purchased in the current year budget, funded in the current year budget. In addition, we have partway through next year in order to staff and to maintain the BMPs.
So what? Yeah, so it is unfunded, but so who actually, Bill owns this or does Emily own this?
Well, this is
Neither?
These BMPs are spread amongst a whole bunch of different departments. Some are Parks and Recs, some are General Services, some are Yawns, and so we actually have not been maintaining them as a city over the years. They have not been maintained. And so this gets us on the required permit schedule for maintenance. I mean, we will have weekly maintenance at BMPs throughout the city. We have to be able to certify in order to be able to get the credit of those BMPs that they are functional and that they are removing the pollutants that we have certified.
But the positions are yours.
Yes,
right?
the positions are Yawns and the BMPs.
He technically has oversight.
So a lot of people.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I want to ask, so, you know, we have this requirement. So what happens, like the development on the corner of Eisenhower and I think it's Mill Road, and it's going to have a new park and pond?
Paradigm.
Yeah. Is that our responsibility or is that the developer and owner's responsibility to maintain that?
For that particular pond, we negotiated that the developer is responsible for paying that particular pond.
That was the big thing.
But Potomac Yard, they are,
Most of those are privately maintained.
Those are privately maintained as well?
There's others like Ben Brenman, Lake Cook, and other BMPs like that, the one in front of Beakley Library, and then basically any development that the city did post 1992 has a BMP that the city's responsible to maintain.
So we will be inspecting those private BMPs.
That was my question. We inspect it even if they're private.
Exactly.
Even if the developer.
So this is
and
for
do
both.
those,
Sorry.
and do those private BMPs, do we get credit for those toward our state or federal requirements and things like that? Is that
for anything that's installed after 2009, that's redevelopment, those reductions go to the city's overall load reduction. So the TDS, environmental quality section, now the stormwater section, does the inspections of all the private BMPs, and then we, require them to maintain them. These 7 positions are for the city-owned and operated BMPs. And the storm system, where we're looking at, as we talked about before, putting some new BMPs in public rights of way. They will also be maintaining those as well.
and how does Virginia Water factor into, or Renew factor into?
Well, they're sanitary lines.
Well, I know, but I'm just asking if they have any.
It does. These are sewer stormwater, and they're sanitary sewer.
How'd you get to 7? I mean, it's a lot of fires in it.
We consulted with DEQ. We looked at the Virginia occupational safety requirements for getting in enclosed spaces, because some of these BMPs are below grade, and we also looked at what other cities are doing and the frequency of maintenance. 189 miles of storm sewers and the 80-some BMPs, we expect to have these crews working year-round at various BMPs. Some of our BMPs, I have to tell you, have not had maintenance for years, owned by different departments throughout the city in different facilities. And it's just the way of deferred maintenance has been over the years.
So yeah.
Well, if you go to more green infrastructure, is that more labor intensive or less labor intensive?
Well, I mean, we're weighing it out.
And there's, depending upon the type of infrastructure, potentially there's more routine maintenance with green, but over the long term, it may have some net savings in terms of kind of, you're not having to do a major capital reinvestment in 20 years, but from a yearly operational, you tend to have to do more, whether it's replacing mulch and those kind of things versus going in and replacing concrete every 20 years.
Yeah.
So these 80 that you referenced, Rich, these are the 80 city-owned?
These are across the departments, the 80 city-owned. These are not ACPS. These are not private BMPs. These are different BMPs associated with city buildings, parks, structures, in the right-of-way and not in the right-of-way, but owned by city departments.
Okay, so these 7 augments both the maintenance of the 80 that we own, as well as the private inspections?
Right, and 189 miles of storm sewer, which right now we're being mostly reactive with complaints and proactively for our permit going out and actually cleaning them and servicing those lines.
So right now I have a BMP on my street, and every 2 to 3 to some periodic years, you guys send us a letter, and you say, hey, we want to come by and look at your BMP, follow us up and schedule a time. So this is decreasing that that tempo of when you come out and inspect, or I mean, are you inspecting more? Is there an advantage to that?
This is going to put all of our private BMPs on the regular inspection schedule. This gets all of our city-owned BMPs on a maintenance inspection schedule, and this gets all of 189 miles of storm sewer on regular maintenance. One of the things that was in our permit and the findings is that we have very poor regular maintenance. And that's a recurring theme throughout almost all of our infrastructure. We just have not put the resources toward regular inspection because what we've done over the years, if you look at the numbers with all of our right-of-way maintenance, it's pretty much stayed static, and our number of lane miles, number of sidewalk miles, number of storm sewers and sanitary have all increased.
So is it fair to say that Jan has the manpower, but Bill takes care of all the record keeping and has so he calls up Jan and says, hey, I need 5 guys and
you're the brawn.
Yeah,
brains.
Brains and brawn. Well, no, I mean it's.
Wait, which one's brains? Which one's brawn?
No one's gonna flex this.
And the reason I asked about Renew is under the soccer field we have this.
Yes.
Are they ours or are they theirs?
They're theirs, and that's $1 million gallons worth
right.
of sanitary sewer storage tanks. One 600,000, one 400,000. So that's Alex Renew, and it was put in by private development.
In regards to, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, revenue side for storm and sanitary, there's no proposed change. And the stormwater dedicated access, basically we work within the available resources, the 7 positions we talked about, and the sanitary sewer setup. He is not proposed change, level, pretty much level funding for the coming year. Case of stormwater, we know that as we ratchet up, this is the implementation requirement from the state. We only have to get 5% the first 5 years, and then it goes to 35, and then 65% the next 5 years. That the current revenue stream for stormwater will be inadequate. And this past year and next year, TDS and this is a few other partners who are working on basically a long-term plan for stormwater implementation, and with that will come what it costs and council meetings how we might pay for and it's a state requirement. It's basically us and a lot of other jurisdictions.
And Mark, are any of your figures presented to us? You're assuming $1 million.
Yeah.
Oh, it's only on the
It is not. We have
okay.
state dollars that we got as a grant for stormwater. That's for sanitary. That's for sanitary. So that's
Oh, I didn't know it was just that. Sorry, I didn't know it was just that.
Okay. And speaking of which, slide shows Lake Road is basically for a fairly low dollar amount, considering how much it's going to spend over the next few years. Resources for $3 million listed in two cases. Retrofit Lake Road and take care of 100% of our stormwater requirements in 5 years. However, as we put together the stormwater plan, how challenging it will be to do the next 5 years to 5 years after that, given the percentage at multiples of 5%. We're looking basically to, if we finish more than 5% in the first 5 years, so that we're ahead of the game by the time we head into other projects. What are we actually doing to think of?
Nothing's been decided because we haven't started our outreach effort. But the typical things that we'd be looking at is installing a forebay so that you can capture the bulk of the sediment going into Lake Cook, and then we then have to dredge the main lake less frequently, pull out the sediments in the forebay on a more routine basis.
What is the forebay?
Basically, it's a chamber, whether it's concrete or natural berm, to slow down the water after it comes into the pond, and then it settles out right where the basically Strawberry Run enters into Lake Cook. So you would put a chamber there, so the bulk of the sediment, not all, but most of it settles out in that forebay. We're looking at an aquatic bench on the perimeter of Lake Cook, where we would basically have a 2-foot shallow aquatic bench that allows for aquatic plants that further remove nitrogen and phosphorus from the water. And we're looking at upgrading the overflow of the outfall structure. So right now there's basically just a weir, whereas we're certainly going to consider the option of an upflow filter that we have, like at Alexandria, which does a greater efficiency of removing. Part of the feasibility study will be to look at if we make it slightly larger, what are the benefits, what are the impacts to open space, balance those out, and try to, if we can, to the extent you can extend the residency time in the pond, the better efficiency you get with the sediment. So can you design a pond, make it slightly deeper, those kind of things that we're trying to do.
And Bill, does anything with the homes run improvements tie into this at all, or are they two totally separate?
This would be downstream.
Well, I know what it is.
But it basically would be treating all of the water that's coming down Strawberry Run that goes into Lake.
Navigation channels, they call it seven spaces, and I know that they're used because there really is a more cost-effective way to do it, so you don't have to create little thing.
Mark, just for the mayor council, I know you know this, when we went to DEQ, I'm going to say Bill and Lynette with this project, sort of development phase, I think they were pretty amazed that we were able to achieve just about a little 5% with these projects, and what's I think more makes me very pleased, and hopefully you all, is that it really is a very limited budget, taking use with a developer, developer phase, walking the paradigm, looking at this project, and being able to use grant funds to be able to achieve that first 5%, rather than saying we need X number of millions of dollars.
I would only add, stay tuned, because we are going to be doing some outreach to look at potentially retrofitting Ben Brenman possibly as a similar opportunity. Even though it was originally designed, we think we can do a better job, and therefore we plan accordingly to do our outreach. Not all the grant money has been issued, so our hope is possibly a year from now that we can pursue grants to possibly do a comparable, higher, even a better resolution for Ben Brenman. Not when we're going to be doing the actual construction, but the hope is by putting in the forebay, that actually, and maybe some aeration is another thing to add, that actually the aquatic quality of the pond hopefully can actually be better efficiency. There's still a little pier that goes out. We would take a look at that. As far as I know, but I think we'll check.
The next slide is basically the third area of our focus group, which is phosphorus. First, the top piece is regards to the transportation area, these are the largest and lots of things here again because of the NBTA funding and its ability basically to add the service with really not costing the general fund total additional money, modest subsidies, the biggest piece, and that is increased $700,000 increase for in total. This is all funds, and when you look at the amount of general fund budget, it has been reduced 6, 7 by using NPT, the new money that we're getting from NPTC, so the net money to pay for the operating budget. In addition, there is several $1 million in the CIP we're being able to cover with additional NPTC aid, and that reduced borrowing $7 million. The things we flag here are, and we talked about the civic engagement position already. There would be additional money to fight against in the operating budget for sidewalk, street maintenance, and bus shelters. In addition, it's proposed to increase the employee transit benefit in order to incent more employees to take transit to get to their work sites in the city. So that some cases bring a car every 2 hours around City Hall. So this is intended to substantially increase the employee transit benefit. In addition, there is $195,000 for increasing the Main Street trolley, and that relates to increasing the starting trolley at 10 o'clock in the morning rather than 11, and also extending the trolley on peak nights, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night. Now it stops at and this will take to midnight. That is an area of high demand.
Mark, what subsidies are there? New service.
In a sense, we took some things in the general fund, created some transit money, and some new services we funded TIP, particularly the BRT that wasn't implemented by TIP, moved that to NPTA 30% money, so that is that's the way we funded on transit services.
And Mark, the employee subsidy, which is fine, but if we ever talk to the garage owners about going in, particularly the one right underneath here, Junk, Diamond Square, the MIT, I mean, that is a really, from what I gather, it's a pretty underutilized garage. I mean, if we are going to, I mean, providing a subsidy is great, but is that really going to incentivize anyone to really go hard? It may or may not. You know, I don't think you can automatically assume it's going to prevent people from.
That's true.
And it is a contentious issue with people in the neighborhood.
We have
city marked vehicles parking in spots that are zoned and without meters and all. You know, it's sometimes raises its head. But have we talked? So we tried to get some agreement where we could have a, you know, hey, instead of $30, you know, for $40 or whatever it is a month, we could park next to work.
We have explored a number of parking solutions to private parking garages and greater additional capacity. I can come back to specifically what some of those responses are, but we did a pretty thorough analysis 6 months or so ago. We were trying to find a workable, sensible solution to parking in and around Old Town. I asked that question today at the first employee town hall about that parking issue, because I've not had much success in hearing familiar conditions spaces. And as I sit here, I don't remember what all of the responses were, but we specifically looked at private garages in and around our facility to try to open up those spaces.
That to me, long term, is more of an issue in terms of, you know, retention. If someone's salary is off by $500, okay, well, for a year, that, is that the deal or no, then that's something else. But, you know, I think a benefit like that or opportunity to park if they do have to drive, I think, you know, ultimately, you know, some sort of solution to that, especially in the light of the fact that I think a lot of people parked out at the health department, didn't they? Or
Not
supposed to.
too many.
We had it wasn't packed. We had some employees who were parked there.
Yeah. But I just think that public policy that we should be encouraging transparency.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying
for lots of reasons.
But the reality is, at this point,
Some people.
a lot of people still drive. I mean, we're not.
The last piece on this page is just a Shelby Yard Metro Station where tax base on the roads in Shelby Yard, the dollar amounts of accounts plus pay for the EIS and then design of the station, which is really interesting. Next slide starts on capital highlights linked to this big focus group, which is clear to our initiatives. We have basically enough money in this budget to receive projects, green restrooms, small working out 75,000 budgets of these restrooms for the Blackwell Beach restaurant. This is the build out of that and the money for the operating budget and Parks and Rec to maintain those. The money in CIP green is needed periodic credit. Also design and engineering. The waterfront plan implementation, design and engineering is the biggest piece, and the second biggest piece for this would be enough money to get us through fiscal 15 design and engineering. We've done fiscal 15, also during 15 we'll get through that with idea phases, and I kind of recosting based on the plan of be able to then look to a year, a little less than a year from now for the CIP. We'll have an idea of costing when things go in place, and also I recall a good portion of the improvements along the waterfront is supposed to be paid by the tax increment from development, so we'll have an idea of what Robinson North and South development will be as we work for the next 6 months, and it's bring online, as well as our hotel, and that together will have the financing piece, as well as the costing out of the park improvements. And so future CIPs will see a plan of how we fund specifically and plan the elements of the waterfront. Capital bike share is an area where the talk for last discussion on this and with an evaluation in the next 8 stations are put in place. Funding will be out of the operating budget, which will be transportation, obviously, and substation requirements.
And where are we with getting capital bike share done right now?
Sandra?
As you know, I shared some information about the bankruptcy. The infrastructure is ready, and we're working to get it released as quickly as possible. So we're hoping in the next month or so we'll be able to start selling.
And that was my next one. So where's the company in their bankruptcy? Are they settled?
I don't have any updates from the last time we shared with you, but we're working to with our vendor who's not in bankruptcy proceedings. We're working to get it from the manufacturer. And
So it'll be a direct acquisition, right?
I'm sorry?
A direct acquisition from the manufacturer.
Correct.
But aren't they dependent on the parent company then?
What we're actually working with is the manufacturer directly acquired from them, and that way fixing the whole issue, we would be able to bypass that.
Yeah, but who's going to maintain that? If they don't actually buy it and we buy it directly, do we have then maintenance responsibility?
Well, Capital Bike Share is perfectly fine. It's the company Capital Bike Share.
Well, I know, but
Stations run that the city of Montreal
yeah, I know.
called a loan on them and basically bring them to bankruptcy.
Right.
At least in monitoring, it's at least days here. Vendors particularly New York City. I mean, when you look at some of the vendors in cities that have programs similar to capital like a city like New York, that in fact there's a huge vested interest into continuing on the program and not having it.
Well, they also have city corps subsidized.
New York, that their Bloomberg and said that they're going to invest it. It's a different
Let's focus on that.
But it's a managed equipment. It's the same issue, right?
It's the same, right.
Equipment, it's a service, and use all the vendors in a sense, and the actual operators of capital light share are working through it so that there's not a disruption.
So I know, because when I first heard about it, it was on NPR that morning, and several of the localities and states were pretty concerned about what would happen downstream, depending on what happened in Canada. Have we ever talked about the possibility of corporate sponsorship?
We have.
We have that ability, don't we?
We have, and actually it comes up periodically with developments that are coming in. So we got to talk about that as well as just going on straight corporate sponsorship. And we're going to look at that because this is really going to be, I think, the functional conclusion of our expansion in this sort of methodology. You're right.
What's the point for corporate sponsorship? To get the sponsorship, they're going to want more visibility. Like stations as opposed to.
And typically, what they want is the advertising. They want to be able to advertise their corporate sponsorship on the bikes and on the racks themselves.
So do we have the ability, I would imagine the stations, we have the ability to do that, but the bikes is not to reach against the cabbie, so they would have to sell the advertising.
They're actually talking.
There are some conversations with the jurisdictions that make up Capital Bike Share to go out with an RFP for that type of sponsorship. Each jurisdiction would control whether or not they chose to have advertising at the actual stations themselves. Because the bikes move from station to station, that's really a system-wide decision.
And Sandra, is it true? I mean, where I've seen Capital Bike Share like operations in other parts of the country, I think practically just about all of them are corporate sponsored. And that's how some communities are actually paying for it, as opposed to that's not corporate. Yeah.
Not all of them, but many of them are.
Yeah. Okay. As the manager mentioned the other night, what we talked about last night as well. Like that, a recognition that our roads need to be resurfaced, and there is
conversations.
There is an enormous increase in posts in the CIP, increase in the number of miles repaved, double that. So it goes to $4.5 million in 2015 to be able to get to the last slide is just to clarify and talk about, and that is given the MBTA monies that are available, recall that the 2.2 cents is in the sense in order to get MBTA money, you have to have commercial add-on tax for transportation purposes, or you have to put and 2.2 cents serves as our equivalent, and therefore if to meet this effort requirement, we have to calculate
have to admit I had a little bit of pause about revising the tip, but I think the NVTA changes that quite a bit. And then the other thing that kind of weighs on me is, since we originally, when we talked about the tip, it was new and expanded, and here we are, and we're laying off people, we're cutting, a whole lot of services, and there's kind of a dissonance there where you're, at the same time, you're creating new stuff, and you're slashing, other stuff. So this somewhat deals with that, and allows us to kind of settle.
And it's an urban build-out city. We don't have the expansion needs.
Well, just think what it would be if we didn't have it.
That's right, exactly. No, that's exactly right.
And with that is the last slide of the presentation, and we've got the calendar showing that policies and right ones.
So I would town hall 17, 18, we'll come back with the work session. Friday, 19, yes. We're planning on unless you want different focus on the operating budget. So we can talk about some of the capital context of the overall capital, which is not so able to do. Like to change that, let us know what happens.
Town hall meeting starts at 6:30. 6:30. And I'm sorry, what did you say?
I'm saying that on March the 19th, the work session of PCBS at this point is on the operating budget, the capital of the TIP, unless you tell us you want to change that and do all of your stuff at the time. So that you talk, what we talk about, we're going to put the 5-year plan.
Well, you're asking whether we combine capital and operating.
Our suggestion is to keep it separate, but I want to make sure you understand that's what we intend to do and give you opportunity. We haven't talked to them about talking about both. Our plan all along was to focus on operating on the 19th. All of our capital at once. I didn't really want to disjoint capital special.
We are not prepared to have that capital session next week. We're still doing some other work to show you.
Big capital discussion.
So we could move all of capital up by the big issue.
Rashad, can I just get a little clarification? I want to come back to the marketing fund real quick. You're talking about this new approach about investment and what it means down the road and dollars returned. So pretty sizable cut here. And just want clarification, and I'm going to make some points here about the proposed to focus. So as I read this paragraph, you're taking the fund, reducing it by $85,000, and then you're going to take that $85,000 and use it toward targeted marketing to Old Town and Delray.
Well, the concept is right. Remember, so we take the $85,000 and $50,000 will remain in the current fund until 35, and we focus the $50,000 to go where it comes out.
And other geographic areas of the city, those are campus.
Right.
So we're just reducing the fund.
Yes.
Okay. Nothing.
I personally, and Rashad, you and I talked about this. I know, at the time when this decision was made, there probably wasn't anyone in the room who was a champion for this, or if there was, probably didn't understand what was going on. But the initiatives that this group, if we're looking at a part of our economic development that tends to get overlooked a lot, small businesses, particularly in the Old Town area and the Delrays, which has been primarily the big focus. The initiatives, the Old Town Boutique, handcrafted, I just wrote some down, Carlisle Food and Wine, Torpedo Rebranding, Art League, Arts and Craft, Style Book, which the group just approved. I mean, all those things, without some of those efforts, just the first one they did was the boutique district. Without the efforts and some of the things that they've worked on, I'm not sure a lot of these businesses would have come together and would still be here today. So I think we really have to, look at that. I know it's maybe something ethereal to some folks, but I think we really need to, to look at that, because I think we're getting a big return on our dollar and supporting, a group of businesses that would really, get overlooked and have been overlooked.
Well, when the manager briefed me, I recall that I was because there really hasn't been a lot of requests and activity.
No,
We've had a lot.
But I mean, so okay, what was the rationale?
we got $35 million deficit. We have lots of priorities to fund.
No,
I
understand all that.
That's the reason. That's the reason.
Yeah, but I think there are a lot of, and the thing I'm struggling with, Rashad, is, you know, when we look at all the things in the budget and some of the things that are funded, and some of the things that aren't funded, and this one gets cut that has demonstrated results and returns to the city, and others, some of the groups that we heard from Monday night, that at best can make a marginal case if you really get beyond all the emotional stuff. I mean,
Can I ask a related question? So, last year, you proposed and we accepted some additional, I believe it was money for ACBA on regional marketing, and drew down some additional revenues at the same time. Can we do that again?
Yes, we had talked about that as we were going through this budget process, but I wasn't comfortable as the budget director with it. Particularly in light of what's actually happening with our revenues, irrespective of whether or not that was a return, if they would have been worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to compare.
No, I get it's hard to explain.
So,
well, but it's been on the table for 3 years now, and some of us have saved it, but you know, it's out there.
Well, the plan is that there was, remember, the return on investment study that was done after we had made several large increases in ACBA's marketing. Then there was additional monies put in, and the new marketing campaign this fall, and the intent is to basically do another return on investment study, which is you hire an outside firm, and they measure advertising effectiveness, they measure that and report that to figure out what the return on investment is, both revenue-wise and tax-wise, for the businesses and for the city. That would occur in the fall, and so next budget cycle we'll have that. Part of the intent was to let the monies put in last year go to work, and to let the campaign go to work, and then go measure it.
So
afterwards, the intent is to come back next year. You'll see something by the time we get to the budget next year that will measure the kind of again a new updated review of the effectiveness of the market.
So does this funding level for ACBA maintain the level of marketing that was funded last year?
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay. And is the media mix the same? I mean, I don't know if you can get us something at some point, just kind of a detail of what you're doing, but it'd be helpful, I think, for all of us. So.
The plan is to sustain our advertising effort. We launched the brand last year. We want to keep it in the marketplace. We want to test its efficacy, as Mark said, in the fall. That extra $200,000 last year included additional destination advertising, the beginning of the international program, and also an increase for sales and meeting sales marketing.
You know, one other thing I want to say, Mr. Mayor, about the marketing fund. You know, the fact is, you know, it's all volunteer. I mean, the only staff expenditure is Andrea. She does a great job helping coordinate, but it's all volunteer community experts, you know, who bring a lot of expertise to the table, and in effect act like a quasi, well, not really a field, but you know, a group that has really helped some of these organizations grow. And for free.
Yeah,
Well, you know, when we talk about return on investment, the nonprofit sector is a tremendous return on investment, and they save a child from making bad decisions, helping that child make better decisions for his or her future, to go to college and to become a productive citizen and not go towards crime. The marketing fund, those who serve on it and volunteer, I applaud them. As volunteers, I certainly applaud them, and I want them to know that. I think that the wine festival that I attended once or twice was really great, and a lot of people there came from outside of Alexandria, which was great for our city to be exposed. But you know, we had marketing through AEDP and SBTC and ACBA. I think not
of their funding, but certainly trimming it in such a tough year. Working with them to be creative, maybe in conjunction with ACBA and AEDP and SBTC or whatever, and helping them work with the business community, I would be in favor of more of that collaboration. But when we talk about return on investment, the nonprofit sector does so much with so little. And we heard many stories. Almost 80 people spoke, a number of them from the nonprofit community on Monday night. And the emotional stuff, as you referred to it, I think is heartfelt. The Seaport Foundation or whatever, it's these groups, these nonprofits have a huge impact on the quality of our lives and to those who are the most vulnerable. So if it's one or the other, I would say help that marketing fund and those group, that commission focus with the other existing entities a little bit, maybe reconfigure their efforts and their energies that are so positive.
Yeah, I mean, my comment was
the
not.
wine festival, by the way, I think they make money, so I'm not sure. Maybe some more of that money can go towards marketing. I assume that they've made money every year.
Yeah, but that's what we want. We want to build, you know. I mean, but that's separate.
Yeah.
But my comment was not, you know, a broad brush criticism of the nonprofits. All I'm saying is, at times, like we tried to do with the evaluation of the community fund, is to look at duplication and replication, and at times they too have to make business decisions. They are businesses. They might have nonprofit before them, but they are an effective business. And I believe me, I worked with volunteers and nonprofits for practically my entire professional life, directly or indirectly. So I mean, I get it, but I think
that's a cut that it's not really a cut against the efficacy, you know, the impact of the marketing folks. It's really maybe combining their efforts with the existing efforts in the city that we're already funding. I think that if we're cutting a little bit of their budget, I mean, I want these entities to thrive too.
Okay. The one thing I will say, and you know, we had a work session. We had a work session at a retreat in October, November, whenever it was. I think it was October. And, you know, branding was a topic of discussion. I don't sense that this budget focuses on getting us to a branding perspective. And so maybe this whole discussion of marketing fund, this program, that program, that should be something to be looked at in terms of, you know, wherever the dollar's going to end up going. But let's, you know, I think you get a much more larger return on investment bang for the buck when you start focusing on branding as opposed to a lot of individual programs. So, all right, we'll assemble back. Well, we got the Monday night public town hall meeting at Meatley, and then we'll be back here on Tuesday, March 18th.